In today's video, I thought I would start here and talk about a common shared experience I think that we all have. Who has ever had a favorite version of something, a favorite brand or flavor of a certain item, and you loved that item and you always had it on your list and you couldn't have enough of it in the house, and then all of a sudden it disappeared from store shelves? You just couldn't find it anymore. Infuriating. And talk with friends, they loved it too and everybody was buying it, and the company just inexplicably quit making it. Strange thing. These two things that I brought up as examples, the vitamin water was the blood orange flavor with the caffeine and the yerba that people absolutely adored. It was an alternative to coffee, and they got rid of it. Same thing here with this inexplicable thing. How a company could have stumbled on such a great thing. I love this stuff. I love both of these items. And they're gone now, and you can't buy them. What was happening was this. People realized that people would pay just about anything for these two items. So what would happen is people got in with the suppliers and people got in with the vendors and sometimes with local grocery stores, and they would go as soon as these things would show up and they would buy them all. Buy everything off the shelf. And then they would go to their online sites and they would mark it up. Sometimes they would cut deals and, get it at just a little bit over cost and then mark it up to, what it would have been on the shelf plus 20% and make themselves a little business. Selling this stuff because people would go to the store, it wouldn't be there, and then of course their next place to stop would be Amazon. And the company realized this, that they were the most they were ever getting for this stuff was just a tiny bit over cost because it was just getting snapped up so fast. And so since they couldn't control it, they couldn't control the free market here, they couldn't ever get their product to shelf for retail. So they quit making it. And that was their reaction to it. Now, imagine this on a massive scale in Venezuela. Imagine what would happen if somebody did this with toilet paper, if somebody did this with diapers, if somebody did this with milk. And you have to remember something. Venezuela's only population-wise about the size of California, about 38 million people. That's what was going on. You see, what nobody wants to tell you is this. This is a graph representing the stock market in Venezuela in 2013. Now, the big story is, of course, Chavez and 99 and socialism and, they were failing and blah, blah, blah. Nothing could have been farther from the truth. They had some inflation and they had some problems, but the big reason they were nationalizing industries was because large U.S. interests were coming in and buying them up and artificially controlling the supply of things to drive up the price. It wasn't hard to do. You see, they knew that this country's main driver was the export of oil, so they knew they could drop the hammer on them anytime they wanted to. So, in response to this, the government said, okay, sorry, you are not going to allow American super greedy wealthy interests to basically steal the wealth of the people of Venezuela. We're going to nationalize these industries. And of course they went to their lapdogs in the mainstream media and cried socialism and evil communism and all this other bullshit. But that isn't all they did. They orchestrated a crash in oil. And that's covered here. And they talk about the 4 big reasons. The one big reason was the US dollar was massively being bought by places like China. See, we talked about this with currency manipulation. When China sees its currency becoming too strong, it makes its exports less valuable. So they have to buy foreign currencies like the dollar to weaken their currencies, relatively speaking, to make their exports more attractive. But since all oil in the world has to be converted, to purchase oil, you have to convert your currency into the petrodollar first. People were artificially driving up the value of the dollar simply because of that hegemony, the petrodollar. So when we see Venezuela, the government saw Venezuela becoming more and more powerful and more of a player on the oil market and allied with Iran and allied with our enemies, they found a way to tank their economies, Iran and Venezuela simultaneously. And this goes to point number 2. Another leading factor in the sharp price drop of crude oil is that OPEC, a cartel of oil producers, was unwilling to stabilize the oil markets. Prices of OPEC's benchmark crude fell 50% since the organization decided against cutting production at a 2014 meeting. This is exactly coincide when everything really fell apart in Venezuela. Of the participating countries in OPEC, strangely enough, Iran, Venezuela, and Algeria wanted to cut production to firm up prices. But, predictably so, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and other Gulf allies refused to do so, and Iraq even increased. If OPEC does not cut production, the result is a further oversupply of oil, placing downward pressure on crude oil prices, along with our allies with China propping up our dollar, and it crashed the price of oil. And here was the final nail in the coffin: declining demand. And down here it says, China's devaluation of its currency, like I said, suggests its economy may be worse off than expected, with China being the world's largest oil importer. This is a huge hit to global demand. So this is what happened. This is what happened to Venezuela. The U.S. decided, and I just wanted to bring this up real quick just to show you that population, California, 39 million. And I wanted to bring this up to show you that this isn't just me speaking. This is Business Insider. Clearly a 40% decline in per capita GDP is a very rare event, but several factors make the situation in Venezuela even bleaker. For starters, while Venezuela's GDP contraction in constant prices from 2013 to 2017 includes a 17% decline in oil production, it includes the 55% plunge in oil prices during that period. Oil exports fell by $2,200 per capita from 2012 to 2016, of which $1,500 was due to the decline in oil prices. Basically, what this economist is saying is that 75% of the problem in Venezuela is not mismanagement. It's not socialism. It's not that they aren't an American constitutional republic. It is this orchestrated, planned, and coordinated destruction of oil prices by the U.S., China, and their allies in the Gulf. They could not have a country like Venezuela have any independent thought or any independent desire for direction. When they decided to kick the U.S. out and say, look, you're manipulating our economy, you're manipulating the prices of things, and you're gouging people. And I had that brought up here somewhere. I thought I did anyway. This was the World Bank, and they basically say the same thing. where it talks about how it's simply a collapse in oil prices. And you can look all this stuff up for yourself. And here's the final nail in the coffin. When this kind of thing happens in a normal country, where they have some kind of a problem where a price of something has crashed, they can refinance their debt. They can say, okay, we've had this problem, it was unforeseen, it was massive, it was unprecedented, and in this case it was. We have this amount of debt. We'll go to the bank and say, okay, we need to restructure the terms of this until the prices recover, and then we can continue to pay you. Well, guess what the U.S. had to do? Criminalize that activity. That's right. Access to external financing is restricted, and the public deficit had to be largely monetized. Who else does that? The U.S. This source of financing, price controls, limitations on access to foreign currency, and the collapse of the private sector in the provision of basic goods have cumulatively led to one of the world's highest inflation rates. Well, why did they have to privatize the goods and put price controls on? Well, it goes back to that thing I told you about where we started. Sorry about this. I lost the tab that I wanted to talk about these things that are in great shortage. Was this. They took a page out of the U.S. playbook. When there's these things out there that people will pay just about anything for, there are these forces that will snap up the vast supply of it and hijack the retail chain, for lack of a better term. They will take advantage of the supply chains that have been put in place that get goods to our store shelves. And they'll circumvent all this, and they'll create their online store shelves and make it almost impossible for the companies that make this stuff to make profit on it. And is that socialism or not? Sounds like it to me. And that happens right here in the good old USA. And that's why things were nationalized. That's why companies were nationalized in Venezuela, because their government saw our government and our companies doing this. Going down there and controlling the supply of things to drive up the price. And that's why the stock market graph I showed you was so high. Because these companies were making money hand over fist, overcharging people. So, just a little bit of truth. A little bit of reality to show you that when the bullets start flying down there and the bodies start rolling off the back of the planes, lives lost down there, because we're supposedly fighting evil socialism in our own hemisphere, you'll know what the real reason was. Like, share, subscribe.